How's it going, YouTube? Coming in today with another video, and today, guys, with the brand new is going to be a brand new counter guide to Justice Hunters. Now, this all is going to change day by day just because of the fact that we have so much testing to do. We don't have finalized builds. Draco Tail isn't even figured out yet. There's a lot of different things that we still have to find out moving forward into the format, as far as hand trap ratios, different board breakers to run. Are board breakers better than hand traps? We'll talk about everything today because I really want to make sure that we go in detail into what you can do, at least right now, to really prepare for the format, because things are going to change day by day, and they will keep doing that for a while until this format gets really solved, but I think that's going to be a moment before it is. Definitely go ahead and check out my sponsors over on RW, Cloud, Gem, Arla, Imperium, Dragonshield, and Grimoire. Also, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, definitely go ahead and subscribe to the channel so we can hit our goal at 30,000. I appreciate each and every one of you, and let's go ahead and check out our first slide here. So the first thing is going to be the best options to counter turn 0 plays. Now, my favorite is going to be siding Pink and maining Fenrir. I think both these cards are absolutely fantastic. This is the best into Yummy, but a lot of the canine cards, and even Femina from Dragon Tail, is going to be a problem in the format. So having a card like Fenrir or Pinkertops to just go ahead and throw into a board, you know, and just make sure that your opponent is really reluctant to try to interact with you, at least with Fenrir alone, right? Because that's a card where it's like, do you really want to summon the Azuna? Because it's going to be rough when you can't really get value anyways, right? Because of the fact that the Lupus won't really do anything, right? So the other thing here is going to be Thrust Talent. I feel like right now more than ever, one of the best things that you can do in your deck list currently is run 3 Thrust, a Talent, and like a Black Goat, right? I think that those are fantastic options at the moment. This is also a format that I feel like we'll see a lot of evenly matched, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I do think that these cards are all fantastic right now. These are things that should be on your radar, things that you should own, because moving into this format so far, these have already been putting in stellar results in testing. Talking about the better side options right now, I really like Dark Ruler and Eclipse. These cards might end up actually just being main deck cards, and we've seen decks do this before, where you just main deck like the harder outs to decks, because of the fact that they're really good and versatile if you're going first or second, especially if we're seeing a lot of turn 0 plays, where you can kind of just cut your opponent off immediately, which I think is really important as well. Having cards like Book of Eclipse, being able to use it going first or second, and really just be able to throw off things that your opponent are doing, I think that's going to be more useful than anything. And I think the Book of Eclipse is going to be one of the best cards we can see right now in the main deck. I really believe that's true, especially against decks like Yummy, where that card can just be a death sentence immediately. So that's just something to keep in mind, but I really like Dark Ruler a lot right now too. Lightning Storm Duster are going to be really fantastic against decks like Vanquish Soul, being able to get rid of the field spell, the trap card, and anything else the opponent has immediately is going to be really nice. This also answers the Canine Quick Play too, so they can't just like auto go into anything crazy like Werewolf in a time that you're not prepared for it, right? So you can just go ahead and be like, all right, cool, they're going to be doing this, I'm just going to go ahead and throw the Lightning Storm now. I know what I have to deal with, and it's not going to just like pop up later on, right? So I think that's fine. The other one too is if you're going first right now, DDG is actually like really fire. This card's really good. A lot of times the Vanquish Soul deck and like the Canine cards are pretty reliant still on the graveyard. Being able to add back attributes, a lot of people don't really understand how prevalent that is and how important that is. The other thing too is like if you put your opponent under D-ground and they're losing cards for their Lantern or they're losing like their Lupus, it's a really big deal. Even in Yummy, losing all your cards once they go in the grave is pretty brutal. So that's something that you really want to think about too. This is a card that I could see having a lot of play. And if a lot of people are already going to be on triple thrust, I think that we're going to be in a very interesting format where these one-up trap cards are going to be really stellar. Evenly, I think, is one of the best answers to the format right now. Yes, your opponent can go ahead and like tag out and do other things, but I think that this is going to be one of the cards that truly does put a lot of people on edge as far as how much they want to commit to their board. I've been seeing, especially the Vanquish Soul decks, just go like super wide and put like 4 or 5 bodies on board and different monsters that aren't necessarily Omni negations. Having something like Evenly that can really punish your opponent, I think this is a card that needs to be played right now. And this is a card that's going to be a huge threat. So if you're already on Thrust and playing cards like Evenly, it's going to put your opponent on how much do I want to commit to the board, and am I putting in more side cards like Judgments that could save me in situations like this versus just relying on like all gas, no brakes, right? So Hopefully cards like this being introduced into the format will slow down the format a bit. Now, there's a chance that it doesn't at all, but if your opponent is forced to start bouncing cards off their board because you're about to evenly them, that just means that if you are on K9 cards, you're going to be able to use your K9 cards almost immediately after you go ahead and evenly your opponent. So there's a lot of very good upsides to playing evenly, and I think this is going to be a card that we're going to see a lot of this format. We have a lot of decks that are going to be very relevant right now until we see a ban list. Mitsurugi Raizel is still going to be like the be-all, end-all right now. I think this deck is just so fantastic. And I had a lot of comments where people were like, it's not that good. And I'm like, the Mirakuma alone, being able to tell your opponent to just discard cards, is not ideal. The board wipe, not ideal. X Raizel, not ideal, alright? These cards are broken, and they have proven to be broken. And in the OCG, they don't have Mitsurugi. And Mitsurugi has put a huge dent into our format. So, completely disregarding the Mitsurugi cards into the new format, I think is a joke, and something that we do need to understand that they are still legal, and yes, they are still a heavy presence. And I don't feel like that's putting too much into one bag for a deck, because I think the Mitsurugi cards have definitely proven themselves, and they are still involved in the format. They are still very good. Yummy is a deck that, yes, we need a ban list to go ahead and push a lot of these decks to be a little bit better, but it's still going to be a deck that you have to understand what it does and understand how to navigate around a lot of the plays, because I think Yummy is one of the most layered interactions that we're going to see in a format, just because your opponent can put up a lot of different interruptions through a lot of the interruptions that you have. I like things like Pankratops, Fenrir, or Dark Ruler into this deck. I think that it's going to do a number against it. The other thing, too, is, like, Ash is really good, especially if they're going for something like Obedience Schooled. You also could just play, like, a Delta or, like, Gamma on your sideboard, which we've already been seeing now, and it's been doing very well. And I think that's something that we'll continue to see moving forward. I think that one of the best sleeper decks right now, like top 4 by far, is going to be Crystron K9. I think this deck is fantastic. Putting up multiple negations and having layered interruption and having a lot to play through with tons of follow-up is really hard to beat. And I've been able to crack through boards like 4 or 5 interruptions and then put up my own board. And when you're allowed to do that in a deck, I think that deck is actually just going to be one of the top runners in the format. The cards are very strong. The Crystron core is very cheap too. So if you can just get your hands on the K9 cards, definitely go ahead and pick up the Crystron cards, because I feel like these two in tandem are going to be very strong. Now with K9 Vanquish Soul, we've already seen people cutting things like Borger down to 1. Which is pretty crazy. That's something that I didn't really think I'd see too soon. But we're seeing a lot of innovation with the ratios in that deck, and we're starting to see Nibiru be a pretty prominent card, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. I think that's going to be a very interesting card next format. I don't exactly know how great it's going to be, but Vanquish Soul is definitely going to have a couple different ways to play the deck. I'm interested to see if people keep going as wide as they are right now, because they're going to get punished by cards like Rock and Evenly a lot more than they already are. So we'll definitely have to wait and see how that plays out. Orcus has just been doing fantastic. It's been doing stellar. And, you know, that's let alone the Euro event that didn't have it, right? So I think this deck will be a deck for a while, especially with the Mitsurugi cards until they're hit. And even then, we still have, like, Orcus Fiendsmith, right? So I think those cards are really solid, and they have a lot of playability, and it's still something that you have to know what they do, because they're really good. The Automat Rai deck, of course, is still X Raizel, still Hand Loop. Malice is still going to be Malice. It's still the most brutal turn 1 deck that we have in the game. We have the new deck of the day being the Gem Knight deck that's like blind second, right? And it's just the New Age Tenpai. So that's a deck that you still have to respect. It can still just outright kill you. It doesn't really matter, right? That's still a deck that you have to look at and be like, well, that can still happen, right? So that's still going to be something that we will see in the format. The other one here is Draco Tail. Now, this deck is going to need the most solving, because this deck is not solved and it's not impressive yet. I don't think that this deck is that good. It's like tier 2 at best. I think this deck, though, has the most potential to be one of the front runners in the format. I think that once we find out what the best way to run this deck is, whether it be like branded tier Draco Tail or like branded Draco Tail or K9 Draco Tail, however it ends up, right? I think this deck has the best potential to be one of the best decks in the format. But we'll have to wait and see exactly how the deck gets teched out, because I think that if someone puts together the correct Draco Tail list into an event, they're going to have a really good time. Now, are hand traps better or are breakers better? To be honest, I think breakers are finally just like a be all end all better. Does that mean you should run no hand traps? Not necessarily, but I think that breakers are crazy. My opponent had a one hand trap and it was Droll, and I like resolved Imseti because I was trying out the Horus cards in the Crystron Canine deck. And then I killed my opponent through that because I just put up like such a crazy board they couldn't crack it, right? And that's absurd because they activated one hand trap and it got way worse for them because you just go Azuna from hand, you just start going crazy and start comboing, right? So at that point, I'm like, that's a little rough, right? And just from activating one hand trap. So unless you also have like Canine cards in your hand, then it's a little rough for you to activate a hand trap. I'd probably only feel safe activating like Perilia or Fualos if I had like Azuna. Because that's why we play Hound. You can summon Hound off of like your Lupus effect, you go into a rank 5, and then it can't be targeted, and then it can't be killed. Like your opponent has to like ding, send it, or like non-targeting banish it, right? So it just gives you a card that you can come back to your turn with and then use it in the standby phase to try to threaten something on your opponent's board. And then you can use like a quick play to try to get into your werewolf, right? So there's definitely going to be a lot of deliberation as far as which is better. But I think right now, more than ever, I just like breakers. I think that they're just better. I do think that we mandatory have to run like Ashfua and Imperm. But other than that, I think breakers are fine. You have to have Imperm right now for Paradise Smasher. And, I mean, that's just a given, right? Like, that card is broken. And it's just so easy to summon. If you are leaning more toward hand traps than you are breakers, I still think the most ideal hand trap lineup is Fualos, Perilia, Ash, Droll, Imperm. And I think that these are going to be the most generic and help you out the most in most matchups. But the one thing that I do want to talk about is going to be Nibiru. Do we think that Nibiru is going to be that good? So, in my opinion, if people are throwing a ton of bodies into something out like an Umbral Horror, or they're going into the Paradise Smasher, or they're going like super wide into their board, then yeah, Nibiru will be great. But you kind of have to gauge that with where people are kind of comboing to in their decks at the moment when you're going to an event. I think this is going to be a meta call at the end of the day. And I do think that right now, people are going really wide, and this card is fantastic for that. But if we start seeing a lot more low-to-the-ground, narrow gameplay, this card will rotate back out of the format. So it's really going to depend on where we start seeing people comboing at, because it's going to change the kind of hand traps that we run. I hope they enjoyed today's video. Definitely go ahead and check out my Twitter, Twitch, Discord, Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. I'll catch you all in the next video, and I appreciate each and every one of you.